in the heart of a remote African village, nestled amidst sprawling fields and ancient baobab trees, lived a young girl named Amina. Her world was small, bounded by the dusty roads that wound through the village, the modest mud house she called home, and the simple joys of childhood. Amina, with her bright eyes and infectious laughter, was a beacon of light in a place where life was often hard and unforgiving. But beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful village, dark secrets festered. Amina's father, Musa, was a man feared by many. His stern demeanor and harsh ways kept everyone at a distance, including his own family. Amina's mother, Maryam, was a quiet woman, her face etched with the lines of a life filled with sorrow. She was a woman who had learned to survive by keeping her head down and her voice silent. From a young age, Amina sensed that something was wrong in her home. The nights were the worst. When the sun set and the village fell into a hushed quiet, Amina's fears would come to life. She would hear the creak of the wooden door, the heavy footsteps of her father approaching, and her heart would race with a terror she could not fully understand. It was during one of these nights that the horrors began. Musa, driven by a twisted desire, began to visit Amina's room under the cover of darkness. The first time it happened, Amina was too shocked to move, too terrified to scream. She lay there, paralyzed, as her father violated her in the most brutal way imaginable. The pain was searing, but it was the betrayal that cut the deepest. When it was over, Amina lay in the dark, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with sobs. She prayed that it was a nightmare, that when she opened her eyes, it would all disappear. But the nightmares only continued, night after night, each one more horrific than the last. Amina tried to confide in her mother, hoping for comfort, for protection. But Maryam, who knew all too well what was happening, turned a blind eye. Her silence was born out of fear, but to Amina, it felt like the ultimate betrayal. She was alone, trapped in a world of pain and darkness, with no one to turn to. As the years passed, Amina's once vibrant spirit began to wither. The village noticed the change in her, but no one dared to ask questions. Her eyes, once filled with joy, were now hollow, reflecting the emptiness she felt inside. And then, one fateful day, Amina realized that she was pregnant. The realization filled her with dread. How could she bring a child into this world, a world filled with so much pain and suffering? She knew that if she stayed, her child would be born into the same nightmare that she had endured. And so, with a resolve that had been building for years, Amina made the decision to escape. One night, when the village was asleep and the only sounds were the distant calls of nocturnal animals, Amina gathered what little belongings she had and fled. She moved quickly, her heart pounding in her chest as she slipped through the door and into the darkness. She ran through the forest, the branches tearing at her clothes, the ground uneven beneath her feet, but she did not stop. She ran until the village was far behind her, until the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. When she finally collapsed from exhaustion, she was miles away from the place she had once called home. She was alone, pregnant and terrified, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had escaped the clutches of her father, and with that escape came the possibility of a new life, a life where her child could grow up free from the horrors she had known. Amina's journey eventually led her to the city, a bustling place far removed from the quiet village she had left behind. But life in the city was no easier. The streets were cold and unforgiving, and the people she encountered were often indifferent or cruel. With no money, no family, and a child on the way, Amina was forced to make unimaginable sacrifices to survive. Desperation drove her to the darkest corners of the city, where she sold the only thing she had left, her body. Each night, Amina would stand on the street corners, offering herself to strangers in exchange for enough money to eat, to find shelter, to prepare for the birth of her child. It was a life of degradation, but it was a life, and for Amina, that was enough. The nights were long and filled with shame, but every morning, when the first light of day broke through the smog and grime of the city, Amina would think of the child growing inside her, and she would find the strength to keep going. This child was her salvation, the only pure thing left in her world, and she would do anything to protect it. When the time came, Amina gave birth in a dingy, overcrowded clinic. The pain was excruciating, but when she heard the first cry of her baby, all the suffering seemed to fade away. She held her daughter close, tears of joy and sorrow mingling on her cheeks. The child was beautiful, with eyes that reminded Amina of the girl she had once been, innocent, full of life. Amina named her daughter Zuri, which means beautiful in Swahili. Zuri became Amina's reason to live, her beacon of hope in a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty. But as much as Amina loved her daughter, The shadows of the past continued to haunt her. She could not forget what had been done to her, and as Zuri grew, Amina's thoughts began to turn more and more towards the idea of revenge. Fate, however, had not entirely abandoned Amina. One evening, as she walked through the city with Zuri by her side, she encountered a man who would change their lives forever. His name was Mr. Obasi, a wealthy businessman with a kind heart and a soft spot for those in need. He noticed Amina's struggle, the weariness in her eyes, and the love she had for her daughter. Mr. Obasi offered Amina a chance at a new life. He provided her with a job, a place to stay, and a promise of security for Zuri. For the first time in years, Amina felt safe. She and Zuri moved into a comfortable home, far removed from the harsh streets where they had once struggled to survive. Amina took to her new life with gratitude, but beneath the surface, the anger and bitterness that had festered for so long remained. As the years passed, Amina's life improved. Zuri grew into a bright, happy child, blissfully unaware of the darkness that had once surrounded her mother. But Amina could not forget. Every time she looked at her daughter, she was reminded of the pain she had endured, of the mother who had betrayed her, and the father who had destroyed her innocence. The more comfortable Amina's life became, the more determined she was to confront her past. She knew that she could not move forward without first settling the score with those who had wronged her. And so, with the resources and connections she had gained through Mr. Obasi, Amina began to plan her return to the village. Not as the frightened girl who had fled in the night, but as a woman of power, a woman with a mission. The day Amina returned to her village was a day no one would ever forget. She arrived in a sleek black car that gleamed under the hot African sun. The villagers, who had once known her as a poor, quiet girl, now watched in awe as she stepped out of the car, dressed in elegant clothes, her posture confident and commanding. Whispers spread quickly through the village. Some recognized her immediately, others could hardly believe their eyes. How could this woman, who exuded power and wealth, be the same Amina who had disappeared all those years ago? Amina ignored the stares and whispers as she made her way through the village. Her focus was singular, her destination clear. She was headed to the small, decrepit house where her parents still lived. The house looked exactly as she remembered it, worn, neglected, a reflection of the people who lived within its walls. When Amina entered the house, she found her parents sitting in the same spots they had occupied for years. Her father, Musa, was now an old man, his body frail and his spirit broken. Her mother, Mariam, looked up with fear in her eyes, as if she knew why Amina had come. Without a word, Amina stared at them, the years of pain and suffering flooding back in an instant. Musa tried to speak, but his words were weak, his voice trembling. Amina cut him off, her voice cold and steady as she revealed her plans. There would be no forgiveness, no mercy. The years of torment they had subjected her to would be repaid in full. The next day, the villagers awoke to shocking news. Musa and Mariam had been imprisoned in their own home, the doors locked from the outside, the windows barred. Amina had made sure they would have no contact with the outside world, no way to escape the fate she had chosen for them. For days, Amina stood outside the house, listening to their cries for help, their pleas for mercy. But her heart had long since turned to stone. She had waited too long for this moment, and now that it was here, she felt nothing but satisfaction. The villagers, unsure of what to do, kept their distance. Some believed that Musa and Mariam were getting what they deserved, while others whispered that Amina had gone too far. But no one dared to intervene. Amina was no longer the powerless girl they had once known. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the days turned into weeks, the cries from inside the house grew weaker until they eventually stopped altogether. Musa and Mariam, the people who had once held Amina in their grip of fear, were now prisoners in their own home, their lives ending in the same darkness they had once inflicted on their daughter. With her parents' fate sealed, Amina felt a sense of closure, but not peace. She had achieved her revenge, but the years of pain and suffering could not be erased so easily. Still, as she walked through the village one last time, hand in hand with Zuri, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The shadows that had once haunted her were now behind her, and she could finally look forward to the future. Amina and Zuri left the village that day, not looking back. They returned to the city where a new life awaited them, a life free from the ghosts of the past. Amina knew that she could never undo what had been done, but she could build a better future for her daughter, and in that, she found her peace. The story of Amina is one of survival, of a heart hardened by the trials of life, but also of a woman who refused to be broken. She found the strength to rewrite her destiny, to seek justice for the wrongs done to her, and to rise above the darkness that had once consumed her. As Amina and Zuri walked away from the village, they left behind not just their past, but the shadows that had once controlled them. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to choose, and Amina was determined to make it one filled with light, hope, and new beginnings. Months had passed since Amina and Zuri left the village behind, and life had begun to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Back in the city, Amina focused on building a stable and loving environment for her daughter, determined to break the cycle of pain and suffering that had plagued her own childhood. With the support of Mr. Obasi, who had become a steadfast mentor and friend, Amina pursued an education, enrolling in courses that empowered her to start her own non-profit organization. She named it New Dawn, dedicated to supporting and rehabilitating survivors of abuse and providing resources for single mothers struggling to find their footing. The organization quickly gained recognition for its impactful work, offering counseling, education, and vocational training to those in need. Amina's own story became a beacon of hope and resilience, inspiring many to overcome their past and strive for a better future. Zuri, now a bright and curious young girl, thrived in the nurturing environment her mother had created. She excelled in school, made many friends, and spent her afternoons volunteering alongside Amina at New Dawn, learning the importance of kindness, empathy, and giving back to the community. One sunny afternoon, as Amina and Zuri walked hand in hand through a bustling community fair organized by New Dawn, Zuri looked up at her mother with shining eyes. "Mama, are you happy now?" she asked softly. Amina paused, taking a deep breath as she looked around at the laughter, the joy, and the lives being transformed through their work. She smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting a profound peace that had been absent for so long. "Yes, my love," she replied, squeezing Zuri's hand gently. "I am finally truly happy. We've turned our shadows into light, and with each new day, we help others do the same." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fair, Amina and Zuri joined hands with friends and colleagues, dancing and celebrating the promise of new beginnings. The music filled the air, and for the first time in a long time, Amina felt completely free. Amina's journey teaches us that no matter how deep the darkness, the light within us has the power to guide us toward healing and change. Through courage and compassion, we can transform our pain into purpose and help illuminate the path for others. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If Amina's story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey. Remember, no matter what you've been through, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and press the notification bell for more videos. Thank you.